Captain Alina Royce stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, staring out at the expanse of space. The distant stars flickered like the last remnants of hope in a galaxy dying at the hands of the Vera. Their fleet, an unstoppable force of darkness and destruction, had decimated countless civilizations. Yet Earth, long abandoned and left to its own devices, had survived. She couldn't help but wonder if that was a blessing or a curse. The Valkyrie was Earth's last warship, a relic from a bygone age, but its advanced systems were a testament to human ingenuity. Its crew, made up of the remnants of Earth's military and allied resistance fighters from distant planets, were the best the Earth had to offer. Yet even they knew they were little more than a flicker in the vastness of the galaxy, a last desperate hope against an insurmountable enemy. "Captain, we've received an encoded transmission from the Outer Rim," Lieutenant Cole said, breaking Alina's thoughts. His voice, steady but laced with tension, echoed in the bridge's quiet hum. "It's fragmented, but I've managed to get a partial decode." Alina turned toward him, her pulse quickening. The Outer Rim was far from any established galactic routes. It was a barren, forgotten sector of space that Earth's forces had long abandoned. But if someone had sent a transmission from there, it meant something. It could be a message from humanity's allies, or even worse, a Vera trap. "Is it a distress signal?" Alina asked, stepping closer. "It's not exactly a distress signal, ma'am. It's more like a map, a location, a place in the galaxy, something called the Ether Nexus. The signal's fragmented, but there's one thing I can make out clearly, a mention of the heart of the galaxy. And most importantly, it says, the artifact is real. We found it." The word struck Alina like a physical blow. The artifact. The weapon of unimaginable power that could potentially turn the tide of the war. It had been a whispered myth, a legend passed down through the galaxy's surviving races. The notion of such a weapon being real, hidden away somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, had been the faintest flicker of hope, almost laughable in its impossibility. But now it seemed Earth's only chance. "Who sent this?" Alina demanded. "Can you track it back?" Cole's fingers danced over his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm trying, but the signal's too scrambled. Whoever sent it knew how to cover their tracks." Alina exhaled slowly, her mind racing. This could be humanity's last chance, but it could also be a trap, an attempt to lure them out, to finish what the Vera had started. "Prepare the ship for departure," she said with steely resolve. "We're going to the Outer Rim. Ma'am, it's a suicide mission. No one's come back from that sector in years. The Vera might be waiting for us." "I don't care," Alina replied, her voice unwavering. "If the artifact is real, we have to find it. Earth is hanging by a thread. We'll take our chances." She turned, locking eyes with Cole. "Tell the crew, we leave now." As the bridge erupted into action, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here. She had no idea what she would find in the Outer Rim, but one thing was certain: the fight for Earth's survival had just begun. The Valkyrie surged forward, its engines glowing bright as it cut through the dark void of space. The Outer Rim, a place so forgotten that even the stars seemed reluctant to shine, loomed ahead. Alina stood on the bridge, watching as the ship's sensors mapped out their route toward the mysterious Ether Nexus. The further they traveled, the more isolated they became. There were no familiar signals from neighboring systems, no communication from allied fleets, just the oppressive silence of a galaxy in turmoil. "Captain," Lieutenant Cole's voice broke through the stillness, "we're getting unusual readings up ahead, a gravitational anomaly. It's not on any of our charts." Alina frowned. "What kind of anomaly?" "I'm not sure," Cole replied, adjusting his console. "It's as if space itself is warping, like gravity is distorting around something massive. Could be a black hole, but the readings are off. I'm not ruling out interference." "Any sign of the Vera?" Alina asked, her eyes narrowing. "None. But if they're here, They're keeping their distance. Alina exchanged a glance with her first officer, Commander Eric Drayden. Eric was a man of few words, his stoic demeanor betraying nothing of his thoughts. But even he couldn't hide the tension in his posture. The Outer Rim was known for its dangers. But this anomaly, whatever it was, felt wrong. Too quiet, too unnatural. "Pull us back," Alina ordered. "Let's adjust our course and see if we can get a clearer scan." As the crew scrambled to follow orders, the ship shuddered suddenly, as if an invisible hand had gripped it. The lights flickered, and the air grew heavy, thick with tension. Then came the scream, a low, guttural sound that seemed to come from every direction, reverberating through the ship's hull. The crew froze, their eyes wide with alarm. "What the hell was that?" Eric demanded, his voice tight with fear. "I don't know," Alina answered, trying to steady her breath. Her pulse quickened. That scream, something ancient and primal, had sent a chill down her spine. It didn't belong to any living creature she knew. Another violent shudder rocked the ship. Alarms blared across the bridge as the gravitational anomaly grew stronger, pulling the Valkyrie toward it with terrifying force. They were locked in. "Helm. Full reverse," Alina barked, her mind racing. But it was too late. The anomaly had them. The Valkyrie lurched forward, and the stars outside the windows stretched, distorted like liquid glass. Time seemed to warp, and the ship's systems flickered erratically. Static filled the comms as if reality itself was being torn apart. "We're being pulled in," Cole shouted, his hands frantic on the controls. "Brace for impact." Alina ordered, her heart hammering in her chest. But even as she shouted the command, she knew it was pointless. There was no escaping whatever this was. They were already in its grip. Then, without warning, the distortion snapped. The ship crashed through a barrier of shimmering light, and everything went silent. For a moment, Alina was sure they had been destroyed. But as the ship's systems slowly came back online, she realized they had made it through, into a vast, eerie expanse unlike anything she had ever seen. The stars around them shimmered in unnatural colors, their light bent and twisted, as if the laws of physics no longer applied. Strange shapes floated in the distance, ancient structures, or perhaps ruins, visible through the translucent fabric of space itself. "Where the hell are we?" Eric's voice trembled, barely audible. Alina's gaze fixed on the dark, sprawling landscape ahead. "We're in the heart of the galaxy," she murmured, "and I have a feeling we've just found what we've been looking for." The eerie expanse they had entered was unlike anything Alina had ever imagined. The Valkyrie floated amidst what seemed to be an ancient, ruined city, its vast, crumbling spires rising like ghostly fingers through the distorted fabric of space. Time itself seemed to move differently here, as though the very nature of the galaxy was warped. The stars above them flickered, their light shifting in strange, undulating patterns. "Captain," Cole's voice crackled over the comms. "We've detected life signs, faint but definitely human. There's a signal emanating from the central structure." Alina's pulse quickened. It was the first sign of life they had encountered since entering this strange place. She exchanged a glance with Eric, who stood beside her. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the uncharted world before them. "We need to investigate," Alina said, her tone firm. "Prepare a team. Eric, you're with me." Within minutes, a small team of her most trusted officers gathered in the ship's hangar bay. As they donned their gear and boarded the shuttle, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on them. Each step felt as though they were venturing further from reality, further from the world they knew. The journey to the central structure was quick, but every second felt stretched out, as if the very air was thick with the weight of history. As the shuttle landed, Alina stepped out into the ruins. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and scorched, remnants of an ancient civilization long since fallen. Towering statues, some of them half-fallen and weathered by time, loomed over them. The air smelled of old dust and decay. "This place, it's ancient," Eric said, his voice low as he scanned the area. "Whoever lived here, they were far ahead of us in technology. This doesn't feel like any human ruins I've ever seen." Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the massive structure in the distance. The signal was growing stronger, but something about it felt off, like a faint whisper at the edge of her consciousness, teasing and elusive. As they approached the entrance of the central structure, a strange humming sound filled the air. The doorway opened without a sound, revealing a vast chamber. At the far end of the room stood a pedestal, bathed in an ethereal light. Upon it rested a spherical object, glowing softly with an otherworldly energy. It was the artifact. The legend was true. But as Elena stepped forward, a voice echoed in the chamber, sending a shiver down her spine. "You shouldn't have come here, Captain Royce." Elena spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. The figure that stepped from the shadows was one she recognized. Commander Zara Albright, a trusted officer on the Valkyrie, or at least that's who she had thought she was. Zara's face was pale, her eyes distant, as if she were no longer entirely present. She smiled, but it was the smile of someone who had already made a deal with the devil. "Elena," Zara continued, her voice soft, almost sad, "you've come for the artifact. But it's not what you think it is. It never was." The betrayal hit Elena like a punch to the gut. Zara was a traitor. The very person she had trusted the most, her second in command, had been working against them all along. "You?" Elena's voice cracked with disbelief. "You've been working for them." Zara nodded slowly, her gaze pitying. "The Vera. They were right, Elena. This galaxy, our galaxy, was never meant to be saved. It's too far gone. But we can end the suffering. Join us, and we'll rebuild everything. Together." Elena's blood ran cold. Zara's words felt like poison, and the weight of her betrayal sank deep into her chest. The artifact pulsed as if reacting to the confrontation, its power palpable in the air. Elena's mind raced as she weighed her options, knowing that Zara's defection could shatter everything. "I'm not joining you, Zara," Elena said, her voice icy with resolve. "We will fight for this galaxy, for Earth." But Zara's eyes darkened. "Then you'll be destroyed." The trap had been set. The battle for the fate of the galaxy was about to begin. The confrontation with Zara left Elena feeling raw, but there was no time for doubt. The artifact sat in the center of the room, glowing with an almost hypnotic intensity. Its power surge, a pulse that reverberated through Elena's bones, urging her to move closer, to claim it for Earth's survival. Zara stood across from her, the air thick with tension. Her betrayal had shattered the fragile trust Elena had placed in her, but now wasn't the time for vengeance. The artifact was more important. The galaxy was more important. "Elena," Zara whispered, her eyes cold. "You don't understand what it can do. This isn't just a weapon. It's a tool of transformation. It can reshape the fabric of reality itself. Join us, and you'll understand." "I understand perfectly," Elena shot back, her voice steady. "I understand that you've sold your soul for power, and I'm not going to let you use that artifact to destroy everything humanity has fought for." Zara's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're blind. The Vera don't want destruction, not really. They want order. The galaxy needs order. It's the only way to save it." Behind them, the artifact flickered, its light flashing erratically, almost as if it were reacting to the words spoken. The hum in the air grew louder, like a heartbeat syncing with Elena's own. "Enough." Elena snapped, drawing her sidearm, and aiming it at Zara. "I'm ending this now." But before she could pull the trigger, the ground beneath them trembled. The walls of the chamber cracked, and the very structure seemed to groan in pain. The artifact flared to life, sending a wave of energy through the room. The blast sent Elena and Zara stumbling backward, but Elena's grip tightened on her weapon. "Captain," Eric shouted from behind her, "we've got incoming." The air shimmered with strange, violet lightning, and from the depths of the chamber, dark figures materialized. They were humanoid, but twisted, creatures that seemed to be made from shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The Vera had found them. Their forces were already here. Zara's voice was sharp, filled with a mixture of glee and desperation. "You've awakened them. This is just the beginning." Elena's heart raced. The artifact had done more than just draw attention. It had triggered something far worse. The Vera had always been able to manipulate dark energies, but now it seemed the artifact itself was a beacon calling them to this place. "Get to the shuttle. We need to get out of here," Elena shouted to her team. But as they turned to make their escape, the shadowy creatures lunged, their forms flickering like smoke in a breeze, and a battle broke out. Elena's heart pounded as she fired at the first shadow that charged, but her shots passed through it as if it were made of mist. Eric swung his blade, cleaving through one creature's form, but it reformed instantly, more aggressive than before. "Elena," Eric yelled, parrying another attack. "We can't fight these things. They're too strong." Zara's voice rang out over the chaos. "You have no choice but to use the artifact, Captain. It's your only way out." But Elena shook her head, sweat pouring down her face. "I'm not using it. Not like this." In that moment, a surge of power hit Elena. The artifact's energy seemed to flood her mind, overwhelming her senses. The presence of the artifact, its pulsing light, wrapped around her like a shroud, pushing into her consciousness, forcing her to see beyond the present moment. Visions filled her mind, visions of the galaxy in flames, of humanity caught in a war it could never win. The faces of the fallen, her crew, her family, all vanished into a whirlwind of memories and horrors. "Elena," Eric cried, pulling her back to the present. "We need to leave. Now." But Elena felt a strange, unearthly calm settle over her. The power of the artifact had awakened something inside her, something that connected her to the galaxy itself. She could feel the threads of destiny pulling her in different directions, each one leading to a different path, a different future. And then, as if sensing her shift in perception, the artifact responded. Its light enveloped Elena, and she felt her consciousness fracture, splitting into something both human and more than human. The power surged within her, and for a fleeting moment, she saw what could be. The chance to save Earth, to save the galaxy, or to bring about its end. The surge of energy from the artifact coursed through Elena like wildfire, her body trembling under its overwhelming force. It was as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled, exposing the raw power of the cosmos. She could hear the whispers of ancient voices, feel the weight of time itself pressing down on her. The visions continued to flood her mind. Images of destruction, of entire star systems consumed in flame, of humanity standing at the precipice of annihilation. "Elena." Eric's voice broke through the haze, but it sounded distant, muffled, as if coming from the bottom of a deep well. The energy of the artifact continued to swell, thrumming through her veins. She could feel its purpose, its intent, to reshape the galaxy, to remake it in a new image. But at what cost? She was torn between the temptation to wield this power and the knowledge that such a force could destroy everything she held dear. The artifact was not just a weapon. It was a force of creation and destruction, a tool that could alter the very laws of existence. A shiver ran down her spine. Was she strong enough to control it? Suddenly, the shadows of the Vera's creatures closed in on them again. Their twisted forms flickered and darted like ghosts, claws slashing through the air. Elena's heart raced as she fought to focus, but the power of the artifact threatened to overwhelm her senses. The creatures were relentless, their attacks growing more vicious with each passing moment. "Captain," Eric shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "We need to go now." But Elena's eyes were fixed on the artifact. It seemed to pulse in response to the chaos, as if feeding off the conflict around them. No, she couldn't let it control her. With all the strength she could muster, Elena fought to reclaim her mind. She focused on the faces of her crew, the ones she had sworn to protect. And slowly, her thoughts began to clear. The artifact's power receded just enough for her to regain some control. But it was not gone, not entirely. It still hummed in the back of her mind, urging her to act, to use it. Elena, Zara's voice came again, this time colder than ever. You can't resist it. You've already felt it. The power is yours to command. Join me. We can reshape the galaxy together. You'll be a goddess, and I will stand beside you. Zara's words dripped with honey poison, but Elena stood firm. She couldn't give in. Not now. I don't need to reshape the galaxy, Elena said through gritted teeth. I just need to protect it. She turned to Eric, his face taut with fear. Get to the shuttle. We'll hold them off. No, Eric protested. We're not leaving you behind. I'm not asking, Elena replied sharply, her voice unwavering. I'm staying. The artifact's power is too great. If I can control it, I can stop this madness before it destroys us all. With that, Elena raised her hand, and the artifact's light flared to life. It responded to her will, a surge of energy that sent shockwaves through the chamber. The shadows recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. Elena's vision blurred, and for a moment, she felt like a conduit for the universe's fury, powerful and all-encompassing. The creatures screeched in pain, their forms dissolving into wisps of dark smoke. But the artifact was far from finished. As the Vera's shadows began to evaporate, the artifact shifted once more, pulling on the very fabric of space around them. The air hummed with energy, and the room seemed to warp in response. Elena, Eric shouted, his voice urgent. What are you doing? The power was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She felt herself slipping, the temptation to wield it completely overwhelming. But just as she was about to lose herself in the artifact's power, a single thought anchored her. Earth. Her connection to the artifact snapped, and in that instant, the entire chamber erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shadows were gone, evaporated by the overwhelming energy she had unleashed. When the light faded and Elena opened her eyes, she saw only silence. The ruins were still, and the oppressive energy in the air had dissipated. But as the chamber grew quiet, Elena realized something was wrong, something deeply wrong. She felt different. The artifact had left its mark on her, and she could sense the shift in her very being. She had unlocked something within herself, a new, terrifying power, but with it came a terrible understanding. The galaxy was not the same as it had been before, and neither was she. Elena's breath came in shallow gasps, her mind reeling as the energy of the artifact continued to pulse through her. Her hands trembled, and the room around her seemed to warp and flicker like a mirage. She could still feel the echoes of the power, the sheer, raw force that she had just unleashed. It was as though she were tethered to a new realm, one where the lines between reality and something far darker were beginning to blur. The once imposing ruins now lay in silence, their ancient stones cracked and shattered from the onslaught. The air itself felt thinner, charged with a static energy that seemed to ripple across the chamber. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing the air. A wave of power followed her touch, and the very walls seemed to pulse in response. Elena, Eric's voice broke through the fog in her mind. His hand was on her shoulder, but his grip felt distant, as though the world itself was pulling her further away from him. She looked at him, and he froze. His eyes narrowed with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. There was fear in his tone, fear that she hadn't heard before. "I don't know," Elena whispered. She couldn't explain it. The artifact had altered her in ways she couldn't comprehend, filling her with an overwhelming sense of power, but also a deep, gnawing fear. The galaxy had shifted, but so had she. "You're not just the captain anymore," Eric said softly. "You're something else." Elena looked at her hands, and for a moment, they seemed to shimmer, flickering in and out of focus as though her very form was destabilizing. Her chest tightened with a wave of panic. Was this how it was going to end? Was she going to lose herself to the artifact's power? No, she whispered fiercely, trying to steady her breath. I won't lose control. I can't. Eric stepped closer, his voice steady. We need to get out of here. The Vera know we're here, and they'll be coming. We can't fight them all. Not like this. Elena nodded, tearing her gaze from the artifact's glowing form. She had to pull herself together. She couldn't afford to fall victim to the artifact's pull, no matter how tempting it was. The Vera were still out there, and they were still a threat, perhaps even a greater one than before. She couldn't lose herself now. She turned toward the entrance, but before they could move, the ground trembled again. The air was thick with a hum, and suddenly, a dark figure appeared in the doorway. It was a Vera. It stood tall and menacing, its alien features twisting into a grotesque mockery of life. Its eyes glowed with the same eerie light as the creatures from before, but this one was different. It radiated a sense of ancient power, a presence that was unmistakable. It was their leader. Elena's heart pounded as she instinctively reached for her weapon, but it was useless. The Vera leader simply raised a hand, and the air around them grew heavier, denser. Elena felt the pressure pushing down on her chest, suffocating her. The power of the artifact, which had felt so limitless moments ago, now seemed fragile in the face of the Vera's will. The leader's voice was a deep, rasping growl. You have awakened the true power of the artifact, human. But do you truly understand what it means? I understand enough, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. She would not let herself falter. Not now. The Vera leader's lips twisted into something resembling a smile. Then you will understand the price of power, Captain. The artifact is not a tool for mere mortals. It is a key to a future that is beyond your comprehension. I don't care about your future, Elena snapped. I care about this one, and I'll fight to protect it. The Vera leader stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the chamber. You think you can control it? You think you can control the power you've unleashed? You are already changing, Captain Royce. It's too late for you to turn back. In that moment, Elena realized the full weight of the Vera's words. The artifact had given her more power than she could handle, but it had also begun to change her, physically, mentally, and spiritually. She wasn't just wielding its power. She was becoming something else entirely. Something more dangerous. Something that could either save the galaxy or destroy it. And the Vera knew it. Elena felt the weight of the Vera leader's words settle into her bones, a cold truth that rattled her core. She was changing. She had felt it. The power of the artifact had seeped into her, reworking her very essence. It was more than just strength or ability. It was something deeper, something that threatened to consume her. The Vera leader stepped closer, the air growing colder with each of his slow, deliberate movements. His eyes glowed with an ancient malice, and the very space around him seemed to warp, as though reality itself bent to his will. You're afraid, he said softly, almost pityingly. Good. That means you understand. You've already tapped into a power beyond your comprehension, but you don't control it. Not yet. Elena's pulse raced. She tried to focus, tried to summon the strength to resist the pull of the artifact's influence, but it was so strong, so overwhelming. It whispered to her, beckoning her to embrace its full potential, to let it consume her. And part of her that she feared, wanted to give in. Get away from her, Eric's voice rang out, shaking with fury. He moved to step between Elena and the Vera leader, but the alien simply raised a hand, and Eric froze, his body paralyzed in place. The air around them crackled with dark energy, and the force of the Veras will press down on them like an iron weight. You can't stop this, human. The Vera leader sneered. The artifact is already yours. Your resistance is futile. Elena's eyes narrowed. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let the artifact take her entirely. She focused on Eric, her mind fighting through the fog that clouded her thoughts, reaching out to him with whatever strength she could muster. "I can't let you control me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The artifact pulsed in response, its light flickering like a heartbeat, threatening to overtake her. But Alina clung to the image of Earth, the people she loved, the soldiers who had given their lives for this fight. She had to hold on. For them. The Vera leader chuckled darkly. "You are already mine. You've chosen this path." "No," Alina said, her voice stronger now. "I choose my own path." She stepped forward, pushing through the oppressive force the Vera had placed on her. The artifact roared within her, a tidal wave of energy crashing against her mind, but she fought it. The memories of her crew, her mission, and Earth itself anchored her. She wasn't just a vessel for the artifact's power. She was a captain, a leader. And she would not let this alien force strip her of that. With a sudden, decisive motion, Alina reached out with her will, slamming the artifact's power back against the Vera leader. The force of it knocked him back, sending him crashing into the wall with a deafening crack. The dark energy around him faltered, dissipating like smoke. For a moment, the room was still. Eric blinked, his body relaxing as the Vera's grip loosened. He stumbled forward, his eyes wide with relief and disbelief. "Alina, you." But Alina didn't have time to respond. The artifact flared once again, its power surging uncontrollably. This time, however, the surge wasn't just a burst of energy. It was a deep, almost sentient force, as if the artifact itself had recognized Alina's defiance and was retaliating. "Alina, stop," Eric shouted, but his voice was lost beneath the overwhelming hum of power that filled the chamber. The Vera leader, recovering quickly, rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won, Captain. This is far from over. The artifact isn't just a weapon. It's a gateway, one that connects us to the true source of power. You've unleashed something you cannot comprehend." A strange, low rumble filled the chamber, and Alina's eyes widened in horror. The walls began to crack, and the ceiling above them groaned, as though the very structure of the ruins was coming undone. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Something was coming. Something ancient and far more dangerous than anything the Vera had shown her. The leader's grin spread, full of dark satisfaction. "You've set it in motion, human. Now we will see if you can survive the consequences." The chamber seemed to collapse around them, the air thick with shifting energy. Alina could feel the artifact's influence pushing her, pulling her toward something darker, something that could very well tear the galaxy apart. But she would not give in. Not now. Not ever. The ground beneath Alina's feet shook violently as the ruins of the chamber seemed to pulse with life. The very air around them crackled with raw energy, a terrifying force that threatened to consume everything in its wake. The artifact's power was no longer just a tool. It had become an extension of the galaxy's deep, forgotten darkness, a force that reached into the very core of existence. But Alina wouldn't yield. She couldn't. Not now, when everything she had fought for, everything humanity had struggled to protect, was on the line. The Vera leader stood across from her, his eyes filled with gleeful anticipation, as if he were watching a grand spectacle unfold. "You don't realize it, do you? You've unlocked the gateway. The artifact is calling to something older than any of us. We are merely its servants. The power it can unleash, it's beyond even our comprehension." Alina's grip tightened around the artifact, its surface warm against her skin, thrumming with an unsettling energy. She could feel its pulse resonating within her, an unrelenting pull to wield it, to bend it to her will. But there was a war inside her now. The artifact was too great, too dangerous for any single soul to control. It whispered promises of power, of ultimate victory, but Alina knew the truth. Giving in to its ardor would doom them all. "Not your power," she growled, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Not today." Eric, his face set in a determined grimace, was already moving to flank the Vera leader, ready to take action. But Alina shook her head, stopping him. Stay back. This is mine to finish. The Vera leader laughed, the sound a low guttural rasp. You think you can fight me alone? The galaxy is already lost. You cannot stop the tide of fate. I don't need to stop fate, Alina replied, her voice sharp. I'm going to rewrite it. She felt the artifact respond to her command, a surge of power coursing through her body. The world seemed to bend, time itself stretching and warping as Alina's mind locked onto the artifact's core. She wasn't just trying to control the power anymore. She was shaping it, channeling it into something that could preserve the future she believed in. She could see the threads of reality, threads she had never noticed before, twisting and tangling, waiting to be unraveled. The Vera leader's confident smirk faltered as the artifact's energy flared around Alina, blinding light cutting through the shadows. What are you doing? He hissed, his voice filled with sudden uncertainty. I'm ending this, Alina said, stepping forward, every step sending waves of energy radiating outward. You don't get to destroy my future. You don't get to decide what happens to humanity. In that instant, the artifact's power tore through the chamber like a storm, its energy wild and untamed. The Vera leader was struck by the force, his body thrown back, as though the very fabric of space had turned against him. He screamed, a sound of pure agony, as his form began to fracture and crumble, his once immense power unraveling beneath the artifact's relentless energy. Alina's vision blurred, and for a moment, she felt herself slipping again, losing herself to the artifact's seductive call. But she held firm, clinging to the image of her crew, of her ship, of Earth, and the future they were all fighting for. She wasn't just a vessel for the artifact's power. She was its master, and she would not let it destroy her. The Vera leader's cries faded into nothing as his form dissipated, vanishing into the chaos of collapsing reality. The chamber, now nothing but a shattered ruin, fell silent. The darkness that had once surrounded them began to lift, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. Alina stood there, trembling, as the artifact's energy slowly ebbed. Her hands ached from the force she had wielded, her mind dizzy from the intensity of it all. But in her heart, she knew she had done it. She had won. The galaxy was not lost. Not yet. Not while she still drew breath. Captain. Eric's voice broke through the silence, his tone soft but filled with awe. You did it. Alina nodded, her breath coming in slow, steadying gasps. No, we did it. As the remnants of the artifact's power faded into the aether, she looked toward the stars outside the ruined chamber. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had survived, and as long as they stood together, they would continue to fight, to protect, and to carve their own destiny. The war wasn't over, but the battle for the soul of the galaxy had been won.